Okay, and we are live.
Great. All right. Thank you, everybody, for being here. This is the House Energy and Digital Infrastructure Committee on Friday, February 7th. And we are here today with Barbara Neal. Thank you so much for joining us. And we're going to learn about the Public Safety Communications Task Force. So Barbara, we'll quickly go around the room and introduce ourselves, and then we'll turn it over and let you introduce yourself for the record. So I'm Representative Kathleen James from the Bennington 4 District.
Hello, Barb. Scott Campbell from St. Johnsbury, Caledonia, Essex.
Chris Morrow, Wyndham, Windsor, Bennington.
Michael Southworth, Caledonia 2.
Christopher Howland, Rutland 4.
Graham Klepner, Chittenden 13, Burlington.
Jack Locker, Committee Assistant.
Super. Barbara, over to you. If you identify yourself for the record, please.
Great, sure. Yes, I'm Barbara Neal, Executive Director of the Enhanced 911 Board and co-chair of the task force. Thanks for having me in today. I do apologize for not being there in person, but wanted to share that I certainly appreciate the flexibility this remote option provides. I do hope to meet those of you that I don't already know sometime very soon. So I'm ready to jump into an overview of the Public Safety Communications Task Force, if you are.
Great.
Okay. So let me share my screen. Sorry, thought I was going to be all ready for this. There we go. Okay, hopefully everyone can see that.
Yep. Yes.
Yep.
Okay, great. Excellent. Okay, so the Public Safety Communications Task Force was created in 2023 by Act 78, and we were tasked with the planning and implementation of a reliable, secure, and interoperable statewide public safety communications system. And to that end, the task force has been meeting on a regular basis since Act 78 became law during the veto session in 2023. We've had over 40 regular meetings and 10 or 12 special meetings since that time. The task force is made up of 7 members. Act 78 identified the co-chairs of the task force as the Commissioner of Public Safety, that's Jennifer Morrison, and the Executive Director of the 911 Board, which is yours truly. The other members of the task force are Paul White, who is Vice Chair of the task force, and the former chair of the Barrytown Select Board, and a previous regional dispatch working group that tackled some of the same issues that the task force is looking at now. Also on the task force is Jim Mack. He is a public safety answering point, or PSAP, representative, representing a PSAP that's overseen by a municipal police department. Ron Kumitz is the chief of the Alburg Fire Department, and he is representing the Vermont State Firefighters Association. Mayor Mike Dungis from Rutland City is the municipal official appointed by the Vermont League of Cities and Towns. And Michael Wright is CEO of Calex Ambulance, appointed by the Vermont Ambulance Association. It's important to keep a few things in mind when we talk about the task force. First is, while the Commissioner of Public Safety and the Executive Director of the 911 Board were named as the co-chairs of the task force, this project is not driven by either entity. So it's not driven by the 911 Board nor by the Department of Public Safety. Department of Public Safety does provide administrative support for the task force. So you will see, like the link to our webpage, for example, is hosted by the Department of Public Safety. Second thing that's important to know is that the task force has no preconceived notion of what the future state looks like for the public safety communications system. We're committed to an open discussion about those possibilities with all the stakeholders and, of course, with our contracted industry experts. The third thing I want to point out is that the scope of work for 2 reports that are coming out soon. It's important to understand that the task force work is focused on the dispatch function in Vermont. And while there's plenty of discussion about how the statewide 911 system integrates with the dispatch function or how it could possibly integrate with, a comprehensive assessment of the 911 system was not part of the scope of work for the task force. And I'll speak a little bit more about that distinction between 911 and the dispatch function in just a minute here. Okay. One of the first objectives or goals for the task force when we first began meeting was to issue 2 RFPs, requests for proposals, to get the subject matter experts that we needed to advance the work. So we have hired or did hire in early 2024 a company called Televate, who serves as our project management team and trusted advisor to the task force. And then a second company, Mission Critical Partners, was hired as our system planning vendor. So these 2 entities are working very closely with the task force, and both have provided tremendous assistance to the task force work. And this is the part where I want to go back to talk about the existing landscape of emergency communications in Vermont. I'll start with 911. Vermont has a single statewide 911 system that is overseen and managed by the Enhanced 911 Board. This system routes 911 calls and text messages to one of 6 public safety answering points, or PSAPs again, around the state. All of Vermont's 911 call takers are fully trained and certified by the board, including a certification for emergency medical dispatch. 911 call takers answer the 911 calls. They determine the nature and location of the event. They connect 911 callers to the appropriate dispatch center for the needed responders. And then they provide any needed pre-arrival instructions to the caller while responders are en route. Now, in some cases, the PSAP itself provides dispatch services for the needed responders in any given emergency. And in other cases, the calls must be transferred to another dispatch center for notification of responders. And that brings me to the dispatch service function in Vermont. So dispatch service is currently provided by 37 dispatch centers. 6 of those centers are the PSAPs that I just mentioned. So the PSAPs, in addition to having 911 call taking responsibilities, also provide dispatch services for multiple agencies within their jurisdiction. So 6 of the 37 are PSAPs. 6 dispatch centers are located out of state, and the remaining 25 centers are scattered around the state and vary in size and the service that they provide. So the emergency communications professionals at these dispatch centers focus on coordinating and supporting emergency responders during events and monitoring responder locations and activities. Dispatch service at these various dispatch centers may be governed at the local, county, regional, or state level. And you've noticed that I've highlighted dispatch service on this slide. And that's just to reinforce what I said at the beginning, was the focus of the work required by Act 78, and thus the focus of the work of the task force, is on the dispatch service component of this landscape. There's lots of conversation to be had around how the 911 system and the dispatch services around the state interact, and that's part of the discussion. But there wasn't, like I mentioned, an in-depth study of the 911 system itself. So here is briefly a bit of a summary of where we are, the work that we've been doing. So with the help of Televate and mission critical partners, the task force has nearly completed the inventory collection is complete. The analysis of that inventory will soon be released in a report from mission critical partners. This was accomplished. This data data collection was accomplished via a robust data questionnaire that was sent to each dispatch center, includes a cybersecurity assessment, radio system inventory and assessment, and an assessment of the governance models and communication standards in use around the state. In addition to the questionnaire, Mission Critical completed site visits at all 37 dispatch centers, and all of the data has been incorporated into the inventory and assessment report that is currently being finalized and should be available very soon. Now, it is important to note that this inventory report that will be coming out very soon will contain information directly related to the security of dispatch systems and networks around the state. And that information will need to be redacted from any publicly released version of the report, and any legislative discussions that are needed around those aspects of the report will need to occur in a confidential setting. So once the report is ready, it will be reviewed for those redactions related to system security concerns. The task force also held 4 regional town halls, specifically for emergency responders, emergency communications personnel, and legislators. And we held 2 community listening sessions to engage with the general public. This is in the information gathering part of the project when we were trying to understand the priorities and goals of the stakeholders around the state for a future statewide communication system. And over the course of the 6 outreach sessions that have happened to date, the task force has engaged with over 150 community members. And of course, that's not including the outreach to the sites themselves and some engagements that have happened as a result of people reaching out to us. So with all of this data and feedback, there will be a separate system planning report, which is currently being developed, that will outline multiple potential paths forward for Vermont. We expect a draft to be made available for public review by February 19th. We'll have a public review timeline of about 30 days, a month, for people to give us input on those various options and that system planning report. We are planning more stakeholder and public engagement sessions to solicit that feedback. And that report will also be available for viewing and comment on the task force webpage. So that is the high-level overview of the work that we've done to date. Our work has been deliberate, and I hope you'll find comprehensive once these reports become available. If you'd like more information, you can visit our website, which is housed within the Department of Public Safety webpage. You'll find us under boards and commissions. And you can certainly always reach out to us by email if you have additional questions. And I'm going to stop sharing so that I can see you and defer back to the chair to see if we have time for questions.
I have a question. Sorry if I missed this. Once the report is released, you said coming up next is a public comment period, and then
Yes.
will you'll revise the report, or based on public comment, or?
Yes, my expectation is that we'll receive the feedback from the public and other stakeholders, and that feedback will be incorporated into a next version of the report.
Okay. And again, I apologize if I missed it. And the final report is due, what's the deadline for that?
I'm going to need to check my notes. Let's see, the public comment period will end around March 20th. I'm pretty sure it's early April, but I can get back to you on that.
I was just curious, and then does the task force live on, or do you conclude your work and disband?
No, it will live on for some amount of time in order to determine or make recommendations on which paths we might want to consider. I think that there will be time to think about whether or not we need additional resources to help make those decisions.
Okay,
So yeah.
great. Yeah, Rep. Southworth.
Correct me if I'm wrong, ma'am. You stated that there were 6 out-of-state dispatch centers?
There are 6 centers located out of state that dispatch for responders in Vermont.
So I gotta ask, how come we don't have them all in Vermont, employing Vermonters?
Well, those are existing dispatch centers in the neighboring states. And I think that they had made their service available, right? So it's based on contracts with responders, and responders are able to choose who they'd like to be dispatched by. So I think some of the decisions are based on the level of service that a particular center provides and what other resources or what other options might be available in any given area.
Is there any want or goal to have it within Vermont, employing Vermonters, or no?
I'm not sure that we've gotten that far, and that kind of goes to the no preconceived notion of what the end result should look like.
Fair enough.
These centers do provide a good service for these agencies, the response agencies in Vermont, but your point's well taken that they're not located within the state.
Thank you.
Yeah, Rep. Campbell.
Well, that sort of suggests, Rep. Southworth's question sort of suggests that maybe there's competition between the dispatch centers for the service that they provide. Is that kind of the situation?
I think that there is now, and that's one of the things that kind of got us to this point with the task force and the work that is doing is the known inequities in dispatch service, right? The availability of the service, the amount that service costs, who's providing it, and at what cost. What level of service does each of them provide? And how is that equitable for all response agencies across the state is one of the questions.
Oh, and if I could follow up, I don't think you covered this, but maybe I missed it. How are the costs of the dispatch service paid for?
Well, that is actually part of the inventory report. So there's there's a variety of ways. So the state emergency communications centers, of course, are state funded, operated by the Department of Public Safety. So I would think typically general funded there. And then you have county level dispatch centers that would be funded in a different manner. And then the local are funded primarily through municipal budget process and all of that. I think I've got them covered.
They're all publicly funded. There's no sort of fee associated with, I don't know who would pay it, but
well, there's costs associated with it, with dispatch service. And so those are worked out between the individual dispatch centers and the agencies that are using that service through contracts primarily.
Oh, so for example, in my area, Calix, the ambulance service, might pay the dispatch center for. Is that correct?
I would need to check specifically on Calix.
Well,
and what their arrangement is. I don't know offhand. I should mention too that I mentioned that some of the arrangements are based on contracts, but then you have the cases where a community or a municipality provides service just for its own response agencies, right, within that community, and theirs are less likely to be dependent on a contract and more part of just the operation of the municipality. So there's a number of different ways. And then there are some agencies that do not pay for, well, they don't pay directly for dispatch services that they might be receiving from the Department of Public Safety, for example. So that is all part of that equity question.
So all of this is part of the reason why this task force exists, is to try to sort of rationalize the whole thing.
Well, try to understand the whole thing first and identify if there are different or better ways to do things and what those options might look like.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Rep. Southworth.
If the state goes to, I believe it's the Agency of Public Safety,
Mhm.
will the results of your report be affected by that, I guess is a good way to put it.
Well, I think that's probably a better question for the commissioner herself. But as it stands now, the Department of Public Safety operates 2 of the 37 dispatch centers and 2 of the 6 PSAPs around the state. And they have the radio technology division, right, that provides radio infrastructure that's in use around the state. She would need to speak more clearly on specifically how, and other components. So I think they would still most certainly have a role in a future state, of course.
Yeah, I guess I was just trying to see if there were any recommendations about consolidation or expansion of dispatch centers, whether that would change as a result of that possible change happening with the agency versus department.
I don't think so offhand, but it might be a bigger question than I have all the information for. But at first glance, I would say no. The agency would continue to operate, I believe, the centers that they have, and I wouldn't expect them to take a lesser role in that.
Okay, thank you.
And to follow up on Rep. Southworth's question from earlier, so there are 37 dispatch centers, is that correct?
Correct.
And 6 of them are the PSAPs. And are the
Yes.
PSAPs, are they all in Vermont?
Yes. Yes, they are.
Got it. So there, in addition to the PSAPs, then there are 25 dispatch centers inside Vermont and 6 outside Vermont. Is that
Correct.
and
Yes.
are they mostly in the Connecticut River Valley, or are they also New York, Massachusetts?
New York, Massachusetts has at least one. New York has at least one. And I'm thinking offhand of 3 in New Hampshire, but I might have my numbers mixed up there. But no, all 3 states.
And just for completeness, none across the international border in Quebec, is that true?
That is correct, right?
Got it. Thank you.
Rep. Howland.
So some time ago, we went from the Department of Public Safety running 4 PSAPs. We went to 2 PSAPs, Westminster and Williston. And then after that, 4 more PSAPs got formed. Why? Because of uncovered area and then
go ahead, sorry.
Dispatching was initially coming out from 4 to 2. We went from 4, Rutland was 1, to Westminster and North and South. Westminster and Wilmington, I believe, but maybe I have the wrong town in the north. And public safety was handling all the dispatch at that point in time. And now, where do we get 4 more PSAPs?
Well, so a couple things going on here. There were 4 Department of Public Safety PSAPs that 2 of those were closed in Rutland and Derby back in 2015. But even then, there were 4 regional PSAPs already in operation. So when the 911 system started in 1998, I believe there were 10 public safety answering points. So Essentially, those are dispatch centers that also answer 911 calls. Then we reduced to 8 at some point, and with the closure of the 2 Department of Public Safety PSAPs in 2015, we went down to 6. So as it stands today, we have the Westminster and Williston is the town you were looking for. Westminster and Williston PSAPs operated by the Department of Public Safety. They answer about 68% of the state's 911 call volume. And they provide dispatch services for the state police and other state law enforcement agencies and a number of municipal agencies as well within their jurisdiction. In addition to those 2 public safety answering points, there are 4 regional centers. Those are located at the St. Albans Police Department, the Hartford and Shelburne Police Departments, and the Lamoille County Sheriff's Office. And those 4 regional centers have been PSAPs for a very long time as well. So they weren't added on after the closure of Derby and Rutland. They already existed. And between the 4 of those regional centers, they handle, of course, the other 32% of the statewide call volume, statewide 911 call volume. And they provide dispatch services to entities within their jurisdiction or entities that have contracted with them for the dispatch services. Did that answer your question?
Yes, it answered that portion, but it raises another one. So the 2 state PSAP centers, Department of Public Safety centers, used to dispatch all the way down to the town or municipal level. And they're now getting away from that and looking for the municipalities to contract out for fire and rescue. And the PSAPs are going to continue to dispatch for state police.
So the Department of Public Safety PSAPs have always, of course, dispatched for the state and law enforcement entities, and have also taken on responsibility for some municipal agencies as well. There was not a time when, and I just want to make sure I'm understanding your question. There was not a time when the Department of Public Safety handled dispatch calls for every single municipality in the state. That's never existed. Some municipalities have gotten their services from the Department of Public Safety over the years, and some continue to do that. There was many years ago, under maybe 2 or 3 commissioners ago, there was this sentiment that the state police, the Department of Public Safety, would no longer be able to dispatch for non-state entities. And you would really want to talk to the Commissioner of Public Safety about, this, but the thinking on that has evolved in my estimation, and that's not a primary factor right now, though I would certainly, I'll say it again, defer to the Commissioner on that. But the question of equity remains, right? So if service is being provided at no cost and other entities are paying for similar service with other dispatch agencies, does the field need to be leveled, right? From an equity standpoint on that.
And just want to interject for Representative Helen that a lot of your volunteer fire departments contract dispatch service from an area police department, say, like my hometown, they used to, and I don't know if they still do, they used to get their dispatch service from Montpelier. So they would get that from there. So that's pretty much how a lot of the fire departments and even the EMS services work too in the smaller areas.
So they're just an ongoing municipal discussion between at least one of my communities about this and their consolidation with the rest of the people that are, say, within the same antenna range.
Okay, I just wanted to ask, before we let you go. So in the coming report, so where our committee jurisdiction covers digital infrastructure, as opposed to like the government operations committee. I think all the original 911 bills came out of GovOps. I could be wrong, but so we're not so much involved with your governance. So is there to be, not that we can't discuss it, but just in terms of things for us to have on our radar, in the significant work you've done and your work with the consultants and the report that we're expecting to see, are there any recommendations or considerations that we need to have on our radar about sort of what I would call the digital infrastructure of our public safety system? So we took testimony the other day about FirstNet. We talked about the LMR system. So I think that in the Venn diagram of your work and our work, the communications and digital infrastructure systems that connect our public safety folks around the state that's our bailiwick.
Yep, understood. And I think for specific to the task force, right, which is really looking at this dispatch function, there are going to be multiple options presented that will be of interest to your committee from that perspective, right, the digital infrastructure perspective. How or if the task force is able to move forward to those is a whole nother question, but certainly that would be a component of it is a component of the existing systems, right? And you've talked about FirstNet and LMR, and it would be in any future system as well. And then shifting gears a little bit back to the regular hat I wear as executive director of the 911 board, our statewide 911 system is a fully hosted solution, but it does provide that the system for delivery of 911 calls to all of those 6 PSAPs. So I'm happy to come back in and talk to you about what that looks like in more detail, if that's helpful.
Sure. Do you think maybe when the draft comes out in February, you said, right?
March.
Yeah, March.
Yeah. A first draft for public review of the system planning report should be available February 19.
Great. So we'll try to make sure that comes to our committee. We're having we have to be proactive about, in fact, if you think of it, send us a copy. Because
okay, sure.
Well, a lot of the statute, standing up task forces and requiring reports and stuff, a lot of those statutes don't include our committee on the list of committees that reports should be sent to because we weren't around.
Right, correct. Yep, sure, that makes sense.
So we're just kind of trying to make sure that we get all the reports. And I think if folks in the room are interested, it'd be great to have you come in when the draft comes out and maybe walk us through the relevant parts so that we understand what you've learned and what you are recommending.
We're certainly happy to come back anytime you need us.
Great. Additional questions? All right. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Nice to see you all.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Okay. Take care.